Hi, you guys. Welcome to our live event. My name is Brenda K.B. Anderson, and I'm very excited today to be showing you my process that I like to do for visible mending. So this is just one of the gajillions of ways to mend your beloved clothes. And I love this method because to me, it just looks very aesthetically appealing. It's creative, it's fun. It's not particularly scientific, or you don't have to be super careful. You don't have to know that much about stitching in order to start on this. So this is a great project, you know, for anybody who's interested in learning how to visibly mend their clothes. So what is visibly mending? Visible mending? That is just when you're mending something and you're not trying to make your mend blend in or go away, you're actually kind of highlighting it or making it sort of a focal point or a design detail. You're turning it into something more than what it was. You're showing people that, like, I care about this, you know, article of clothing and I made it my own. It's, you know, you're kind of showing people the history of your clothes. You know, things happen in life, and sometimes you get tears or stains or other things like that. And then being able to mend it in a way that looks beautiful and kind of adds more to your garment, that's a really awesome skill to have. So I'm so glad you guys are here. Of course, this is a live event, so if you want to say hi, I know there's already some hellos kind of rolling in. Renee says, greetings from Minnesota, USA. I'm in Minnesota too, Renee. We're neighbors. Hello. Thanks for popping in and saying hi. But definitely say hello. Let me know what you're interested in learning. We're always open to hear about what you guys want to do. I like to learn new things too, and I like to get inspiration from you guys for future projects. I do a lot of live events, crocheting and sewing mostly, some knitting also. So if you guys have any future ideas, definitely let us know. Also, if you have any questions about what I'm doing, if you have any comments, if you have, you know, suggestions or advice for other people who are going to be watching this event, then definitely put those in the chat as well. We would love to hear from you guys. So today is day 3 of the Sustainable Stitches series that Craftsy is doing. And the first day we did the Lucky Leaf pot holder, and that's a really awesome quilted project using small amounts of scraps. And then yesterday I did a live event where I taught people how to make this flare sleeve tee. It was like an upcycled project using t-shirts that you already had or t-shirts you thrift, cutting them up and putting them back together to make something cool and fun. And of course today we have the visible mending, which we're going to get into now. So all right, so let's talk a little bit about materials that you'll need for this. So of course you're going to need whatever it is you're mending. So I'm going to be working on a jean jacket here, but you know, you could be mending really anything with this technique. It is a little bit more suited to woven fabrics because we are using thread that doesn't stretch. So you know, if you want to mend something that's a knit, I don't want to stop you from trying this technique out on it because you probably could use it, you know, with good success. But it is something to pay a little bit more close attention to if you are using knits. So this is more kind of geared towards mending woven fabrics. Okay, so it could be like denims or cotton, you know, quilting fabrics. It doesn't even have to be garments, actually. It could be a quilt that you're working on too. You could use this really for mending anything that's a woven fabric. So also, besides the article that you're going to be mending, you're going to need some sort of hand stitching thread. So what I mean by hand stitching thread is normally we kind of gravitate towards a thicker thread. Oftentimes people will use embroidery floss. Also, part of my project is very heavily influenced by sashiko stitching, which is a Japanese style of stitching and mending, and adding really cool running stitches to things, which I'll be showing you a little bit about. But there is a special kind of thread that's specifically for that, so you could be using that here too. I am going to be using Sulky brand hand stitching thread. They're called Petites, and they are a really awesome, like, I'm very excited about these. I am used to using embroidery floss, and I hadn't tried these before maybe a couple of weeks ago, and now I'm like hooked on these because what you have here in this thread, this is like the same, one strand of this is the same as 2 strands of embroidery floss, or 2 of the little threads in the embroidery floss. And it's on a spool. It has this little, you know, little way to keep your threads from unwinding if you throw them in a bag or put them away in a drawer or something like that. Keeps them all nice and tidy. And those of you who worked with embroidery floss before, you know how it is when you start to pull the strand out and everything gets all tangled and bunchy, and that does not happen with these, which is totally awesome. So I've been loving using these. This has been a really great treat for me. I didn't even know these existed before, and now I'm very excited to be able to add that to my collection of thread. So you're going to need some sort of thread. I'm using multiple colors, but you can definitely do this in, very, monochrome. You could do it in whites. You could do it in blacks. I like the look of it contrasting with the background. So that's something to think about. It makes your stitches really show up really well, and it just looks, in my opinion, it looks the best if you have something that contrasts with what you're mending. Okay, and then you're going to need a needle, of course. So you can use an embroidery needle for this project, or I'm using a sashiko needle here, which is very similar to an embroidery needle. It's a little bit longer. You just have to make sure the eye is big enough on whatever needle you're using so that the thicker thread can go through easily. And it should be, you don't want too big of a needle though, because it's going to be hard to get it to go through your layers of fabric. So those are kind of the things to think about when you're picking out your needle. But you could use an embroidery needle. Depending on what you're mending, you could use a chenille needle. These sashiko needles are nice too. Just something that will fit your thread. Also, some optional things that you could be using for this project. You could be using this sulky stick and stitch. So this is a water-soluble, it's a sticky adhesive stabilizer for your project. So if you're working on the embroidery, you probably don't need this for the running stitches section, but if you're working on your embroidery, this can really help stabilize your piece as you're stitching it, and we'll kind of go into this a little bit more later. I really love this, and this you can print on your computer, which is, on your printer, you can print out, an image. I actually have templates in the back of your download that go along with what I'm going to be teaching you today, so you can just go ahead and print those out. You can cut them out, stick them onto your project, and just follow the lines. It makes it really simple, really super easy. So that's an option too you could use. Also, I'll be using an embroidery hoop for a little while during my project. You don't have to have one of these, but it does help, especially if you are going to be doing some embroidery on a thinner project. One thing to think about though is take a look at the area that you're mending. It may be too small to get an embroidery hoop in there, so think about that. Smaller embroidery hoops are great to use on things like mending because you'll be able to put it into the pant leg or into a sleeve or something like that, whereas the larger hoops won't really fit. So that is something to think about. You don't have to have an embroidery hoop though. That's just kind of an optional thing. And later on we're going to be doing some patchwork. Let me show you what this looks like. So here's an example of one of the ways that we're going to patch this, and you can see here there's a circle here of green stitching and a circle here of blue, a circle here of dark blue and pink stitching, and then there's some other lines that go vertically that are in orange. So the way that I got these circles traced on, I had just grabbed some lids, some plastic lids. You could use anything that's a circle in your house, doesn't matter what, and you can use that just for a template to draw your circles. This is an optional thing too. You don't have to be putting circles into your work, and we'll get more into that later. And you may want to have some sort of marking tool. If you really want to have very straight running stitches, you could give yourself some lines to follow. That's optional too. I just usually eyeball mine because I'm not too concerned about them being absolutely perfectly uniform. I think of this project and this style of mending as more organic and more like just kind of how life is. It's not going to be all perfectly aligned, it's kind of more like a little bit more of an art than a science to me, this type of mending. So, but to you, it may be different. Okay, so I think that's it for materials, and let's get started, and I'm going to show you the different types of patching that we're going to be going through today. We have a hi from Alabama. Hello, Susan. And Dina says, hello from Egypt. Wow, welcome you guys. I'm so glad you guys are here. Okay, so let me show you some of the examples that we'll be running through. The first one we're going to do is this. This is just a running stitch. It's just going vertically. It even goes through this patch right here. And the patch, you'll notice, is on the inside, on the back side of my fabric. So it's kind of showcasing this hole, and the patch is just sort of peeking through. And I really like this method because it looks like a little window into another world to me. Like it's just like a little sneak peek of something else going on the other side, and it makes you curious about it. So I really like patching from the back side. It's just really kind of fun, and you can pick out some fabrics that, you know, they don't have to be, it could be anything. It could be a plaid or a stripe or a solid or whatever you want from behind. But it is kind of fun to use if you have any like quilting cottons that have an interesting print on it. It is kind of fun to just sneak those in there just because, I mean, it's just interesting. So I have a little beehive here on printed on my fabric with a tiny little bee and then some flowers around. And I stitched through everything. I didn't try to go around this or mask those stitches. Part of the beauty of this is you're actually seeing those mending stitches going through everything. Then after I patched it, I added these little embroidered details. So I just embroidered on top of the print that was already there for these two flowers. And then I thought, okay, that's cool, but I like this idea of the beehive being kind of sitting on the inside of my jacket like it's a little door to another world. And then I thought, wouldn't it be fun if there was a bee flying out of it? And so I embroidered this little bee here. And so we're going to be going through, you know, how to add these little embroidered details to your pieces to kind of break up just the stitching, add another layer of just fun to your project. All right, so this is the first thing that we're going to be going through, and then just really quickly, I will show you the other examples. Here's another example of patching from behind and adding a little bit of embroidery detail. So I just had a denim patch put behind, and this time you'll see instead of just straight running stitches, you see these little plus signs. So this is a running stitch going this way and then a running stitch going vertically, and then I added some little embroidered details onto that to make it a little bit more fun. And then the third style that we're going to be talking about, I already kind of showed you this. This is just patches laying on top of your work, which is another fun way to do it. And I think of this as kind of a collage of sorts. And this is really great for patching holes when there's multiple small holes in a place and you need to patch kind of a larger area. It's kind of fun to break it up and put multiple patches on there in different colors instead of just like one big patch that covers up all those holes, or patching a million little tiny holes, which takes a while. So this is more just highlighting those patches. They're laying on top here. And then doing some running stitches in interesting ways. So there, like I said before, there's running stitches that are going in a circle here, and a circle here, and a circle here. And then there are running stitches that kind of run throughout, kind of as sort of like a background, and they're just going vertically. So we're going to go through all these patches. I'll do little demos of them so you can see how they're done, but I just wanted you to have the overview of what we're going to be learning today in this live event. All right, let's see. Emmy is saying, what's that t-shirt? Okay, you're talking about the shirt I'm wearing, I'm assuming. So this is, so on the front of my shirt is, it's a picture of Bruce Springsteen. It's my Bruce Springsteen shirt. And then I have, on the sides, I have Badlands National Park, and then I have Astoria, Oregon t-shirt here. And this is a shirt that I made out of 3 different t-shirts, and I cut them all apart. Yesterday I did a demo on this, how to cut them all apart and put them back together. But I'm a big Springsteen fan, so hence the Springsteen t-shirt here that kind of got cut up and reassembled. Sherry B is saying hi from Germantown, Wisconsin. Hi, Sherry. And we're getting a hello from Lisa Victoria in Tucson, Arizona. Hello. And we have a hi from Sri Lanka, Naz Shafiq. Hello, welcome. And we have a hello from Illinois, Minnie Schnauzer. Welcome, you guys. I'm so glad you guys are saying hi. I'm glad you guys are there. Okay, so we are going to be talking about patching from behind first. One thing I want to point out is that if you are using a quilter's cotton or something that's a little thinner to patch something that's thicker, for example, like I'm patching this denim, it's pretty thick. I don't really like using very thin patches to patch thicker fabrics because I feel like it's going to make a weak point. So you can do a couple of different things. You could flatline it with something like denim, which is what I've done here. I just did a running stitch around the edges to make it a little bit thicker. That's what I'm going to be using here for this patch. Or later on, we're going to be going over this sort of collage of patchwork here. That's okay to use if you've got multiple pieces of the lighter weight fabric going on top. Or if you have smaller holes, it's okay, because those threads that run it through everything make it nice and strong. But you just don't want to patch a large hole like this hole with a thin piece of fabric, because it's not going to be as strong as you would like it to be. Okay, so I have cut out my fabric and I've just done a running stitch all the way along the edges. Here, I'll just show you how I do that real quick. I'm just going to grab a little chunk of this denim. So when I'm patching things, I like to use what I have on hand. I don't normally buy anything for my patchwork. I just use, you know, like right here, I made a pair of cutoffs and I saved the denim from that project. And so that's what I'm going to be using here to reinforce my patch. So I'm just cutting here along that seam so I can open it up and cut my patch out. So before you do this, you may want to just place, if you have an interesting print, you want to place it behind that window and kind of figure out about the size you want. You want it to extend past your, past the hole by, you know, about an inch or so. So you can see it's extending past that hole by a bit. You don't want to cut it close and have it come just to the edge, because that's going to make a weak point there. Why not just have it extended a little bit further, make a larger patch, and it's going to make it nice and strong. So take your time. If you're using a printed fabric, take your time to like put it behind that little window and see what it is that you'd like to see through the window. Because, you know, it's going to take a little while of hand stitching time to get that in place, and you want to love it when you're done. All right. And I am just going to grab a little thread here, and throughout this whole project, for everything, including the running stitches and the embroidery stitches, I have used a double strand of this, the Sulky Petites, the hand stitching thread. So I just loop it through my needle like that, thread through my needle, and use it doubled. And that's a really great thickness, I feel like, for all of the work that I'm going to be doing today. If you are doing this kind of technique on something that's a lot thinner, like a thinner fabric, you want to choose patches that kind of are similar in weight to whatever it is that you're patching. And then you could think about just using one strand of thread instead of two. It's just something to think about. Okay, so I'm going to hide my knot between the two layers just to protect it a little more. So I'm coming in from the back side there. And then I'm just going to do a little running stitch. It doesn't need to be pretty. It doesn't need to be super even. There may be, and it also doesn't need to be very short. It just has to be short enough that you're not going to get something caught on these threads. Like, you definitely want it so, you know, much smaller than where you could get a pinky stuck in there or something else. You know, you don't want to get anything stuck in that thread, but it doesn't need to be particularly, you know, small. You don't need to be doing tiny, delicate stitches here. So I like to just weave it in and out like this, and then just pull it through. Like that, and then pull on your work to make sure it's not getting all bunchy. Okay, so I'll just do that all the way around and knot it off. And that's what I've done over here on this project here. I just wanted to show you my technique for that. You can use whatever technique you like, though, to attach them together. And I should also note that I am not worried about these edges fraying. I know that seems like against everything that we're taught, right? Like when you're sewing things, especially if you started sewing in more recent decades when everybody serges the edges of everything and you finish everything, you know, super carefully so that nothing frays. It is just surprising that you would allow there to be just some raw edges. But this kind of project, it looks really great when things fray a little bit. I think it adds to its charm and its rusticness, and so I just don't even worry about it. I don't fray check anything. I don't finish off the edges of anything. I just cut it and allow it to fray. You know, and if little strings come off, you can cut them off or trim them off. You can always add another patch if something really starts to shred, but I haven't had that problem at all in my pieces. Okay, so here is the hole I'm going to be patching. I am going to place my patch behind that hole. So I'll just turn it this way. Sometimes you might not be able to turn it inside out to look at it. And if in that case, you just kind of place it in there and do the best you can by moving things around. So I'm just going to kind of look at the space, lay it in there, hang on to it when I flip it around so I can see. About where I want it to go. And then we'll get it pinned in. And sometimes when you have holes, that means that that edge has kind of gotten stretched out and it's not, going to be, it's not going to lay perfectly flat anymore. That's fine. You can also steam it or press it a little bit first, your garment first, if it, if you can, if it's something you can press or steam, to try and get it to lay a little bit flatter. And I'm just going to go ahead and put some pins into my patch, and then we'll check the back side just to make sure that it's really covering this hole enough on each edge, each of the edges, just to make sure that I don't have to kind of move it around a little more. So if you're newer to sewing, when you are pinning things together like this, you want to use your pin as though you are sewing. It helps to kind of go in and out. Okay, so I'm putting this into my fabric, pulling it out of my fabric, in and out, and that helps it stay put. And let me just check the back here. Just wanted to make sure that it's fairly centered. It looks pretty good to me. Okay. And you may find that you like using an embroidery hoop for this type of work. I generally do not like to use it for the stitching part, for the running stitches, because I like to bend my fabric as I'm stitching through to get it onto the needle. And if you have it held taut in that embroidery hoop, you're not really able to do that as much. You can put it in the hoop and have it just be a little bit loose in there. And sometimes I'll do that if I can't get my hand inside of something, but I could possibly get a hoop in there. Sometimes I'll hoop it up but have it a little bit loose in there so that I can still just stitch from the top side. I'll explain that a little bit more as I start stitching. All right, so I am going to begin by just sliding my needle in between the two layers. And I'm going to go all the way over here. I can feel the edge of the patch is right there. The corner of the patch is over there. So I'm going to go all the way over there and come up in between those layers. So that way my knot is in between the patch. And here, let me just show you on the back. The knot is in between the patch and the fabric there. The fabric of the jacket, I should say. Okay, and so now I am going to just start doing my running stitches. Okay, I'm just feeling with my fingers to make sure I know where the patch is. You could also draw a little rectangle on the outside if that helps you. You can also, another thing you can do is you can turn it this way and do a running stitch through near the edge so you know where that edge is. I just like to start on the front side because that way I can get all my rows to kind of go parallel, and I don't have to worry about matching it up with an exact edge of this patch. I just want it kind of to catch those edges a little bit. What I mean by that is I'm going to be making these lines that go off the edge of the patch, and so it's going to extend further than the patch, so we don't need to worry about getting like whip stitching the patch in there or anything like that. Okay, so I'm just going to be taking some stitches in and out like this, and they're about 1/4 of an inch long or so. In and out. And I'm just going in a straight line. This is kind of along that top of the patch. And I can feel my patch is about right here, so I'm going to keep going a little bit more so that I'm off the edge of my patch. Then when I get to the end, I'm going to turn my work around upside down because it makes it a little easier since I'm right-handed and I like to stitch from right to left. And on my very last stitch, I'm going to go over here like I'm doing a back stitch, sort of. And then I'm going to come up right there. So this is making kind of the distance where where my stitch isn't. Here, let's see, maybe I can show you with this. So there's a gap between my stitches right here. The same distance from there to there, that's where I'm coming up. So if you think of that as being like a little bit of an L shape, I'm going to pop up right here. And then I'm going to go down right there. So I'm making the opposite path about 1/4 of an inch above that line that I just stitched. So what I mean by the opposite path is you can see where there's no stitch here, directly above it, there's a stitch. Where there's a stitch here, directly above it, there's no stitch. I'm going to remove that pin because it's kind of in my way. We're going to go in here and out, in and out. Just like that. Okay, so now I'm going to take another stitch. Here's the edge of my patch right here, so I'm going to take one more stitch. Maybe I'll go a little bit past that. There we go. And turn my work this way. And I'll come to the outside. So it's almost like you do a little back stitch to finish that very last stitch. And then I'm going to come out just below, right there. And again, I'm taking the opposite path. So this is, I'm making stitches that are directly below the space between the stitches from the previous row. And when you get to all this, the rips and tears, you just ignore them. You just keep going. It seems a little awkward at first to just be sewing through that, especially when you can't actually see what's going on very well. But you just continue on, and it'll look cool. I promise. All right, so every once in a while I like to pull on my fabric just to make sure that it is not getting, you know, constricted by my stitch work there. You don't want it to be you don't want your threads to be pulling on your fabric. You want them to lay pretty flat. Here we go. Maybe I will switch to, I'm feeling like maybe this color is not showing up as much as I would like it to. So I am gonna, oops, I got a little bit off there too. I'm going to cut this. I got a little distracted because I was worried that the color wasn't showing up well enough. So I'm gonna switch to another color just to be sure that you guys can actually really see what I'm doing here. Oh, here, I'll just pull this out through the back. All right, I'm gonna weave that tail in later, so I'm just gonna kind of let it hang out there. Normally, I wouldn't be knotting off on the back like that without having the thread on my needle, so I'll show you how you should really knot it off. I think I'm gonna grab this one, might show up a little bit better. I think. Yeah, maybe you guys can see this one a little bit better. I'm going to switch to this color just to make sure, because this is sort of the foundation of the whole thing that I'm showing you today is how to do these little running stitches. I just want to make sure that you can see it. Alrighty. So when you run out of thread, because you will as you're stitching along, it's nice if you can find a spot to start out that's in between the patch and the thing you're patching. So we left off somewhere in this mess in here. So I'm just going to tuck my needle underneath in between these two layers. Let's see. I'm just kind of sliding it in from the side to get it underneath and in between those two layers, and then I'm going to pop up right here. And that way the knot is hidden. It's in between the two layers, and it's not going to, be bothering you on the inside of your garment. You're not always going to be able to do that, but it is a nice way to start if you have the option. Okay, so I know you're not going to be able to see too well here because I'm going through that very thready part. Here we go. But I think you'll be able to see with this color a little bit better. There we go. And then we're going to come out up here. I'm going to turn my work around this way. So one thing that I really love about this, style of mending is it looks really cool. It's also very good for just meditating and being, like a calming influence in your life. It's a nice way to feel productive, and also it doesn't take a lot of thought or it's just a very calming activity to do for me, at least. So we're going to work our way through here, making those stitches right across all those flowers. Just ignore all the patterning and just keep going. Let's see. Here we go. And here I've come to the end of my patch. I can feel it. And I'm going to come underneath and come out right there. So when I do that, I think about this as being like a little triangle shape almost right here, just to help me kind of space things. We're going to go in and out, in and out. All right, so you can see how when I'm making the stitches, it's, they're staggered compared to the row that I did before, the previous row, but you don't have to do it that way. They don't have to be staggered. This just is for this particular design, the way that I'm stitching this one up. But, the cool thing about these running stitches, and you can think about them as just being a technique that you can use and change and alter to make all kinds of different patterns and have the lines cross in different ways, and we'll kind of get into that in just a minute. But yeah, so you would just keep going over the whole thing. So when you're done, your piece will just have those horizontal lines, and they'll be staggered from row to row. And then after that, you have the option of doing additional running stitches if you like, and so it would turn out a little more like this one because you've got these little checks, so you've got them going in two different directions. So I'm going to, let's see, maybe I'll just finish this one row here and then we'll switch over to the next piece. We've got lots of comments coming in, so I'm going to be checking those in just a second here. All right, so I'm going to tie this off on the back. If you run out of thread and you want to finish off, again, if there is an option to kind of hide your knot in between, you know, your patch and the garment you're working on. I always take that option if you have it. If you don't, that's okay. So you can go ahead and just tie that off. And then, especially if your knot is just going to be back here somewhere, like how I left this knot, then you can go ahead and just weave that in, catching a couple of threads, or going, if you had a flatline patch like I have, so I have 2 layers, I can slide my needle between those 2 layers for just a little bit. I just want to make sure it's not popping through to the front for like a big long, yeah, it looks fine. It's not coming through to the front. You don't want to accidentally make a line that's in a weird spot after you did all that hard work. And then I cut it off. So that might seem weird, but I always like to leave a little bit of a tail from where my knot is if I can help it, because that really keeps your knot from undoing itself. Okay, so you will get all this area filled in with horizontal lines, and then you can start doing vertical lines. And I'm going to, if you want to, you can add more to it by doing some vertical lines on top of that. And I'm going to show you that in just a minute, but I'm just going to check in here real quick. Ooh, got lots of things I missed here. Okay. We have a hello from way down East Maine. Hello. And I'm sorry, can you tell us again what your favorite thread is? So the thread that I'm using, I'm guessing you're asking about that. The thread that I'm using, this is Sulky brand, and it is a hand stitching thread. They're called petites, and it is basically like the equivalent of 2 little strands or 2 threads of an embroidery floss. So when you get embroidery floss, usually there are 6 strands in it, and normally, well, oftentimes, you kind of peel them apart from each other and you only use part of the strand of embroidery floss. And so that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the strands. So this is the equivalent of 2 little threads of the embroidery floss, and I am using this doubled. So there is actually a link, and I'm pretty sure there's a coupon code too if you guys are interested in checking that out for this brand, for the exact thread that I'm using throughout this project. And we have a hello from Massachusetts, and oh, Kelly loves my bee. Awesome. We'll get to the bee in a little bit. Hi from Sweden. Hello. Hi, Pia. Thank you for popping in and saying hello. And we have a hello from Rochester, New York. I love to knit and crochet too, says Lucy. And we have an Olaf from Michigan. Love to see a tutorial about how to put together a two-team jerseys together half to half to wear when your 2 favorite teams are playing against each other. That's awesome. Okay, that's a cool idea. So you cut each shirt in half and take one half and stitch it to the other. That would be fun. Yeah, we did this in the 60s and 70s. I love it. Oh yes, Visible Mending is, you know, making this really great comeback from that time, and it's just, it makes me feel very fortunate that people are excited about it now, because it's such a good thing to do. I mean, not only is it beautiful, but it's just a good thing to do for the environment and for financial reasons, for many, many reasons. And Susan is saying, I could see a rainbow design in my patching future. Excellent. Meditative, yes, would need some calming music and tea. Yeah, music and tea would be a great addition to this. Somebody is asking, could you explain whether and how much trimming should be done to the existing hole you're repairing? Actually, I didn't even talk about that, so I'm really glad you're asking this. It is totally up to you how much you want to trim that hole. So you can trim as much as you like. Just, you know, I like to leave little bits of frayedness. You don't want to have so many strands that it's hard for you to sew. If that starts happening when you're sewing through, you can just cut them off. It's really, this way of doing things is really, there's so much about it that you can personalize to your own tastes. You can go ahead and trim it off. I would not recommend using any fray check or anything like that, because it always just, fray check just makes things stiffer, and it just doesn't look as natural. I like the look of frayed things, so I just leave it really frayed. I like how it looks that way. But one thing to think about too, you know, if you have a small hole in something and you're thinking about doing this type of patching, you can make the hole bigger. Like if you're thinking, you know, it would be cool to put a patch, but you can't really see very much behind. That's something to think about. And if you're wanting to add holes to something, if you want to make your holes larger, Or if you just have a jean jacket and you're like, I love how this looks, I just want to put a bunch of holes in it and patch them up and make it look cool. If you're wanting to do that, there are lots of different ways you can do that. I highly recommend cutting a small hole first with your scissors, and then get out a metal file or a cheese grater or something like that and rough up your fabric, because that really makes it look more like a natural hole. The reason I know this is because I worked in theater for many years and I distressed lots of things. That's what you call it when you're purposely making holes and making things look dirty and grungy, for the characters. So, yeah, so if that's something you want to do, you could definitely do that. Oh, Susan is saying you could dig into Morse code, // to hide words in your patches. That is a genius idea, Susan. Whoa. Pew. Just blew my mind there. Okay, let's see. Jody says, Veronica, we call it house divided up here in Seattle. UW and WSW students in Washington State. Yep. I was just in Seattle recently, which is an awesome city. Teresa says, I think it looks like basket weaving. I like the look. Yeah, it is kind of like that with the weaving in and out. And Suzanne says, hello from Texas. Hello, Suzanne. Kelly says, I just looked and they sell them on Amazon. I'm from Canada, so we don't have as many options here. I added some to my cart. You must be talking about the thread, I'm guessing. Cool. All right. Okay, so you can go ahead and do, you can do these, orient them in any way you like. You can do them horizontally, you can do them vertically, you can do them in diagonals, however you like. So I'm going to show you how to do the section where you're going to be doing stitches that cross over your first layer of stitches. So we're going to hop over here. I've already done a little example here of, so these are some vertical stitches going in this direction, and now we're going to cross over them with another strand of thread. This one seems like it'll show up pretty well. And, as far as thread length, if you guys are wondering about that, I am one of those people who likes to make a really long thread length, so I have to thread my needle a little less often, and I'm pretty good at managing my threads. However, if you're newer to stitching, I definitely recommend keeping to a shorter stitch length, like maybe 20 inches or less, maybe even less than that, because the longer it is, the more chance of tangling, and that's just a frustration nobody needs. All right, so we are going to go ahead and start going back and forth with stitches that cross over, and I am going to just kind of flip this inside out so you guys can see what's happening here. You can see how I've gone off the edge of my patch just to make sure that those stitches are catching that. So if you go further than your patch, your stitches will catch over the edge, and that way when you're putting your arm in your sleeve or something like that, it's not going to be catching on that, that raw edge all the time. Okay, so I want to hide my little knot in here between the layers. So I'm just stitching between the patch and my fabric. And I don't want to have a very long, you never want to have a longer stitch than, something long enough to get your pinky finger stuck in when if it's something that you're going to wear. So I'm going to go out of my fabric right here and turn that, and we'll see where we end up. Pretty good. So now we're on this side, and I am going to take let's see, I'll just stitch along that stitch so you can't see it, and then I'm going to pop up just to the right of it. Here, let me spread this out so you can actually see what I'm doing. So I'm going to be crossing over this first layer of vertical stitches here, and I want to start on the right and go left because I'm right-handed. If you are left-handed, you may want to flip your screen so that this just makes a little more sense to you. So I came out a little too high, so I'm going to take a little tiny stitch downward here. All right, there we are. So I'm going to take a stitch across, and then I'm going to go in and come back out before the next stitch. Okay, so my needle is crossing on top of it, and then I'm going to go in and out, just like that. And so that's going to make those little checks or those plus symbols And the more you do this, the more you're going to get used to just the stitch length that you naturally want to do, and it's going to get quicker. I know this seems like this takes forever, and also it isn't, you know, this is one of those projects that I don't even mind it taking a while because it's just a calming project to do. If this was something that you felt like you had to do quickly because you wanted to get it mended before you wore it out for the weekend, you know, just be aware that it will take a while, but you'll get faster and better at making your stitches an even length as you do this. So here we are in the second row. Just make sure you're just taking little stitches into the fabric so that your needle pops out in front of those vertical strands. Like that. So in case you're wondering what's in the download, if you haven't downloaded it yet, I have lots of photos of these projects here, or of the different styles of mending with the embroidery. I have a template for the embroidered pieces that you've seen on my jacket. And there's instructions on how to do it. I explain which stitches I use. We'll get to the bee in just a little bit, but when you start embroidering the bee, there's an explanation of, you know, I use this stitch for this part of the bee and this stitch for this part of the bee. So it kind of leads you through. It's a really good reference to have if you want to make things look like the project or the mending samples that I have in this event today. But, you know, I hope that you just use this as sort of a jumping off inspiration point. You know, you can use these running stitches in all sorts of different cool ways. You can do different colors, one going one way, one going the other. You can do different shapes. There's just, I mean, it's really just an endless amount of possibility that you have here. And then adding those little embroidered details along with these running stitches, it just makes everything look just, I don't know. I don't know how to explain it really, but more like alive and more organic and more just more fun and interesting. I like it when clothing kind of tells a story and when you can look at something and then you have to take a second look. Like, wait, what is that? Oh, that's so interesting, you know, and you want to take another look and you know, there's more to see. There's more layers. It's like people. All right, so you'll just continue doing this. And again, when you get to all that fuzziness, just keep on going. If it's driving you crazy and you aren't a person who likes to have so much stuff in the way, you can definitely trim the stuff off. You know, you don't need to have all those long wispy bits. I just rather enjoy them, so I just leave them there. All right, so we're gonna move on. I'm gonna get to the end of this row here. Good stopping point. And then we're going to move on to a little bit of the embroidery that goes along with these two samples. All right, I am going to just take a little stitch into my patch here. And that way, I'll put my knot here. And then I can kind of weave, like I was talking about before, I like to leave a little bit of a thread tail kind of woven in. I don't want to see this on the outside, but I'm just weaving it into the patch so that way I can cut it over here. That tail will stay put, and then it's not going to, that knot will just be a lot stronger with an extra little tail sticking out of it. All right, so you can see what that's looking like, all those cute little plus marks or check marks that we have going on there. And then to add just a little bit of fun to it, we are going to do a little bit of lazy daisy embroidery. So that are these little flowers right here. So this is kind of a variation of that embroidery stitch. I'm gonna grab the white here. Oops, kind of split my yarn. Should probably be using my needle threader for this today. I always dream I'm going to have like a little piece of felt with a whole bunch of needles pre-threaded in it for these live events, and then I never remember to do it. So you guys don't have to keep watching me thread needles. All right, so here we are. I'm going to be making one of those little lazy daisy flowers. And I do have on your template, I did do a little, just an example of how you start everything out. So it's just a bunch of little spokes coming out from near the inside, and we're going to fill in that inside dot with some satin stitching. And then these spokes are going to get sort of like a chain stitch or a lazy daisy stitch on top of them. So I start with the spokes. I'm going to come in from the back, and you can choose if you want to have this like actually on your overlapping the running stitches. Actually, because I haven't done the crosses there yet, which I plan to finish later, I'm going to do my lazy daisy up here. Okay, so they can kind of overlap what you're doing, or you can have them up here. Actually, I changed my mind. I'm going to put one up here because you'll be able to just see it a little bit better. But I like to have some of them on the, oops, here we are. Grabbed a little thread from behind. There we go. I like to have some of them on the running stitch section and some of them kind of floating off to just sort of make that transition a little bit more fun. Okay, so I'm just going to imagine this is the center of my flower. So I'm just going to be taking a stitch and going back in nearby. And we'll do one. Actually, I want to come out directly across from that. That makes it a little easier to divide this up evenly. There we go. Close enough for me. And then I'm going to come back here. I'm just doing some little spokes that stick out from a central point. That's what I'm doing here. There's another one. And I'm going to come back. And you could spend a bunch of time trying to get them all perfect and even, exactly the same length as each other, but I never bother because I feel like you could be seeing the flower from a slightly different angle. You're never really seeing the flower exactly from straight on. All right, so after you do the last little spoke, you can come out near any one of those spokes you like. And then I like to hold this up towards the top with my thumb to just get it out of the way, go in at the same point, and come out over here at the tip. And now you want this thread to be underneath your needle because when you pull on that, it's going to trap the tip of that flower petal right there. Then you're going to make a tiny stitch so I'm going over that strand that I trapped to keep it in place. And now I'm going to come out at the base of the next spoke right there. I'm going to bring this up, hold it there with my thumb, go in here, same space, and come out at the tip like this. And then, see, I'm kind of holding this to the side, so that way it keeps my petal in the right spot. I'll show you what I mean on the next one. I'm going to go in right next to that to trap it in place. Come out down here. So I'm going to bring this up, hold it with my thumb, and go in at the base of the spoke and come out here. And if you just pull up this way, oh, look at that, it made my petal too short. Well, I mean, you can fix that. You can just make it longer with your needle. But if you pull on it in this direction, it's going to land in the spot that you want it to be. Now we're going to go back in here. Like that. And, you know, part of mending something is the inevitable awkwardness of hanging on to it. It's not like you just have a little piece of, you know, cross-stitching fabric in your embroidery hoop and you can turn it however you like. It is attached to something, and sometimes it's hard to get your hand in. So just take the time to try and arrange it as best as you can before you make those stitches, because it does, you know, it does affect how your stitches look if you are able to feel a little more comfortable when you're making them. All right, here is my last petal. And then I will go into the inside and I'll tie that off. Normally I like to do a little scattering of these type of flowers on my project. And it's fun to do them in different colors, or you can use a variegated thread, which is fun too. I'm just kind of weaving in that thread tail, just barely catching the threads of the denim so that I can cut it off with a little bit of tail to it. All right, and now let me untwist this arm here, and then we will add a little satin stitching for the center of our flower. Maybe we'll do that in green. This would be pretty. So if it helps you, you can draw a tiny circle in there with like a washable marker if it helps you to see the edges that you are going to stitch. If you, like me, if you can just sort of picture what the center, like a little circle in the center would be. I mean, there already is sort of a circle that's showing up there because of all the points coming together. That may be enough for you. So we can go in here. And we're just going to make some little satin stitches here. So that means we're just making stitches that are really close to each other, and they're all going in the same, they're oriented in the same direction. So little tiny stripes just all stacking up. So yeah, so if I started with a shorter stitch and now I'm getting a little bit longer, make it look more like a circle. And we're just kind of, you know, using these horizontal strands just to fill in that little space there. And then you get a little bit of a shorter stitch on the other side of the circle. Just like that. And I will tie that off. And then we will talk a little bit about those little lilac flowers that I have, the purple ones. Alrighty. So these flowers here are made with a stem stitch and then some radiating stitches and a whole bunch of French knots. So I do actually have, you know, a little piece on the template that is made for this. I'm going to do a very short stem because we're running a little bit short on time here, and I want to make sure I get enough, give you guys all the information that you need. So as you are working on this, actually, I think I'll just cut this out and show you how this works at this point. So I'm going to be embroidering this little bit here. So you can just cut around it. This was printed out on that sulky stitch and stick paper, and I just printed it out on my printer at home. And then you just kind of peel that off, and it's pretty thin, but it's just stable enough that it helps you, and also it'll help you kind of place your piece. Let's see, maybe I'll put it right here. Like that. and it gives you some lines to follow. So I'm not going to do the whole stem right now because we're running a little short on time. So this is going to end up with a shorter stem. So I'm going to start right here. And when you do the stem stitch, you're taking ever so slightly vertical stitches, diagonal stitches. So this is almost going to be a vertical stitch. I'm taking one stitch forward, and then I'm going to come back up right next to it. So about halfway along that stitch, my needle is coming out just to the side of it. And then I'm going to take a long stitch forward. So you're taking a long stitch forward, and then I'm going half a stitch back right now and coming out along the halfway point of the stitch that I just made. And make sure that your needle comes out right next to it. Okay, so you would just continue doing that all the way along the stem. And then you're just going to make some little radiating lines here. And this is what your little lilac is going to have the buds on. So I'm just filling those in there. And there's the last line. And then I will show you how to do those little French knots for the flower. I like to use a variegated thread for these types of flowers because they have all those little French knots, and I just think they look so pretty in the variegated thread. Or I think they're called multis, I'm not really sure. I'm coming from a yarn vocabulary here when I'm talking about variegated, but basically it's thread that changes colors. And even though we're using it doubled, it still looks really cool. And kind of blends together, but it gives it a little bit more interest and dimension. All right, so we're just going to be filling in all these little dots, and you know, you can use my dots as sort of a suggestion. You don't have to put a dot on every single dot, but you just go in and make a tiny little stitch right next to where you came out, like this. And then you're going to wrap that around your needle a few times. I usually do about 4, and I like to wrap it fairly loosely. Like you should be able to kind of slide it up and down, and then I hang on to those little wraps as I pull my thread through. Like that. So it makes a nice little knot, and then you go back into your work right next to it and pop out somewhere nearby. Now what I like to do is pop out, you know, a dot or so away because it's easier to make that stitch. And then I come back and fill that one in right next to it later. Okay, so we'll do that again. So I'm just going to make a tiny little stitch here and wrap this around 1, 2, 3, 4 times or so. And for more wraps, you will get a slightly larger knot. At some point it becomes unwieldy and it kind of flops over a little bit and doesn't look very good. So that's something you can experiment with. And then go back in right next to it. Just like that. So I just realized I did not explain this stabilizer very well. This stabilizer is awesome because you can draw on it with a pencil, you can print it out on your printer, and then you stick it to your project. You can stitch right into it. It gives you a map of where to stitch. And then after you're done with your project, you wash it and it completely dissolves and disappears. So it has to be something, you know, if you're mending something, it has to be something that can get wet because that's how you get rid of it. But it's so nice because you get to see it on the front of your work. You get to use those guidelines, and it's just completely disappears later. So it keeps your fabric from getting all bunchy as you're stitching it, and also, you know, you can see what you're doing. So I really like using it. Okay, so you can see how you make those. You just keep on going and filling in all of that, and your little lilac will look something like this. Really pretty little French knots there. And so now we will move on to the next thing I want to show you. So we'll move on to our beloved little bee. So your bee is also in the template in the download if you want to make some little cute little bees. You just need white thread, black thread, and some kind of gold thread for those. And I've got some bees in progress here. So I like to use, when I'm doing this type of embroidery, a lot of satin stitching and that sort of thing, if I have enough space, I like to use an embroidery hoop for this. If you don't, it's, you know, you can still do it without an embroidery hoop. But I'm going to put that on now. Before I do that, though, you guys can take a look at that little bee. That's what we're going to be making. I'm just loosening up my hoop here. And I'm going to try to get both bees in this hoop. I think I can do that. There we go. All right. So to make the bee, I would recommend, this is something that I don't really freehand because I don't feel comfortable with it and getting it symmetrical and all that. So I would definitely recommend using the template and printing it out and sticking it on, just as you saw me do for that little piece of lilac. So to start out your bee, I like to do some outlining of the wings first and get that in first, and then I start stitching all the other black parts, and then I move on to the yellow after that, and then I go back in with a little black outline around the body. That's kind of my method. So I've got half of the lines that I want to show you done on this little section of the bee. And I'm going to come in from the back here. So let's do the outlines on the wings. Those are done with a back stitch. Okay, so you're going to come up, leaving a little section for doing a back stitch. So you're coming up right here. Then I'm going to make my stitch just behind it here. I'm just following those lines. So there's my first stitch. And then I'm going to come up. If you hoop it with a little bit of looseness, then you can actually push your needle up here if you're comfortable with that. So this would be what it's like to stitch just keeping your hand and your needle, well, your needle does go to the back side, but you're mostly keeping your hand on the front side of your work to be able to do this. And that is beneficial for if you're doing something like a little sleeve, if you're putting something in a smaller space and you can't actually pull your thread because it's too small behind. It's better to it's good to know how to do this, to stitch it just from the front side. I do feel like you'll get a little bit more of an accurate stitch, and it's a little easier to make your stitches look perfect if you are going through from the front to the back, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So instead of kind of scooping, that scooping motion, if you're just pushing your needle straight through the back and pulling it out like this, and then you find that little space and come up over here. So I'm coming up a stitch away and then going back to take that stitch like this. So it is a little bit, you know, you're doing an extra motion here. It's a little bit easier to make it accurate, and for a beginner stitcher, that might be a little bit easier to do it that way. But you can try it both ways and see how it works out. All right. So you will want to just fill in those lines all the way around the wing to here, and then that second little wing to there with doing the back stitch. I am going to I'm just going to skip over. I'll fix that later. I'm going to skip over to the little legs here on the front. So the legs are going to be done with the chain stitch, and the reason that it's not a back stitch and it's a chain stitch instead is because it makes it twice as thick. So this is just very similar to how we were doing those daisies. We're going to insert our needle back in here where we came out, and about halfway up the leg, I keep struggling not to say arms, but bees don't have arms. About halfway up, you're going to come out and wrap that around the back of your needle and pull. So this is going to catch that and create a thicker line. So we're going to do that again up here. We're going to go right back into that very same spot where we came out. And then we're going to come out at the very tip of that line, like this. And then we're going to use our thread to catch that loop. Okay? So you would do that for all of the legs, and then the little antenna are going to be made with a back stitch, just how we were stitching the lines on the wings. So once you finish that and you do all those little lines, then you can start filling in with satin stitches. So again, this is like the satin stitches that we already did at the center of the flower. You're just doing a whole bunch of lines packed right next to each other. You don't want to see fabric in between. And one thing to think about when you're satin stitching something is you want to think about the direction of your lines. You want to think about how is it going to look good. And if I were to do my satin stitches in this direction, they would be really long and maybe not the most stable because you could get things caught in there. And also I just liked the appearance of them going in this direction. So all of the lines are oriented this way. So that means I will turn my work sideways, make a little tiny stitch here on the side of the head, and then a slightly longer stitch right next to it, like this. And then a slightly longer stitch right next to that. All right, there we go. Getting a little lost back there. And then so forth. So we just fill that in. So all of the black sections, so that's this first section, we skip a section. This next section, skip a section, and this section. Those should all be filled in with black, like you can see here on this example. And then once you get to that point, or actually at any point, you can start filling in these little veins in the wings with white. So I'm going to fasten off my yarn back here, or my thread back here. And we'll switch to the white. And for these little bits, I actually don't have these lines in the template for you for the veins in the wing because I just thought it was easy enough to just sort of freehand them in there. But feel free to draw them in on, and you can use pencil or something like that to mark it on your little, on the drawing of the bee so that you know where you want to stitch if you want to do that first. I'm just going to eyeball it. But basically, you're going to divide your wing into 3 sections. You can see if you look at this wing, we have a line right here of stitches and then a line right here of stitches. And then we have some vertical lines that are happening connecting them. So you can just do this with those back stitches. So I'm going to come in here like this. Take a stitch back, going forward, we're going to fill in that little space. Like this. And it looks, I think that it looks good if these are not perfectly aligned. Like if they're just kind of jumbly and they're not exactly uniform between wing to wing or even within a wing, it really is fine. Like I don't want you guys to be too worried about these little veins in the wing. There we go. So now we have it divided, you know, with 2 lines, we divided that wing into 3 sections, and then you can do some little vertical lines in your wing to kind of break that up a little bit. Oops, that came to the outside of the black, which I would probably fix. But in the interest of time, we're just going to let that one go. So we just kind of do some little vertical lines here to make the veins in the wings. And so forth. So you'd fill it in a little bit more here and then some little vertical lines in that little bit of the bottom wing that you can kind of see there too. So you'd fill those in, and then the areas with that we haven't stitched, you would satin stitch those in yellow thread, again orienting your stitches in the same way, and then you can do a back stitch all the way around the whole bee. Now you don't have to back stitch next to the black parts if you don't want to. I just think it looks a lot nicer. Here, I'll pull this off so you can see the original bee. I just think it looks a lot nicer and neater if you can do that kind of outline, especially around the yellow there. You can kind of see, it just kind of makes it pop just a little bit more, so you can add that little detail to it if you like. Alrighty, so now I want to show you that layering section of the patches, and I'll kind of get you set up with that. Where we put the patches on the outside of our project instead of on the inside. All right, so this works great for covering up large sections where you have issues, especially if you have lots of little holes or some stains or just, you know, kind of a large expanse. So I'm going to be I'll be demonstrating over here. What we're working on is this section here, the patches on the outside. And so I'm just going to kind of eyeball some patch shapes that I think would look nice here. And this is, you know, this is part where the art versus science comes in here. You really kind of just have to play with things and see if you like how they look. You don't have to cut out rectangles. You could cut out any shape you want. And I demonstrated that by making this little heart there, because I think it's kind of fun to throw in other shapes as well. You could do diamonds. You could just do a jagged shape. It really does not need to be, you know, you just make it however you feel. So I'm going to do another rectangle here, like that. And maybe I'll choose this kind of fabric would look pretty, I think. We'll do a little heart shape out of this one. So I do have a template for the heart, if that's helpful to you. I am just going to cut my own out of here and we'll see how it looks. I'm just trying to do things kind of quickly here. That looks pretty. So just kind of arrange them in a way that covers up all of the issues and looks nice to you. And you can use, you know, some people like to use a glue stick on things to stick things down, or some other kind of adhesive. You could certainly do that. This is driving me crazy, so I'm just going to cut that off since I don't really need that curl right there. I mean, obviously there's something called an iron that I could be using, right? But I don't have an iron right now, so we'll just cut it off. All right. I think this looks pretty good. And then, so I'm just going to pin everything. I find that I don't really need the stabilizer when I'm stitching on something and it's not going to be shifting around too much. It isn't really a problem for me, but you may find that using a glue stick, I'm just talking about like a regular kid's glue stick, because they're washable. You can wash the glue out of things. And they're easy to come by, they're inexpensive. You can just put a little glue on it and stick it to your fabric. It's not gonna be the strongest adhesion, but it will keep it from sliding around as you're stitching on it. And if you let it dry fully, which you should, it's not gonna, have any residue on your needle as you're stitching. It shouldn't cause any problems like that. I've never had that problem happen. But you want to layer things up a little bit so that, especially if you are using thinner fabrics on a thicker thing like this denim jacket, I'm just going to trim this because I don't really want to be stitching through that seam there because there's too much bulk. You can, of course, stitch through there. I just don't want to do it if I don't have to. All right, so then you want to go ahead and pick a color that's going to show up on everything. And if that doesn't happen, if you can't find a color that'll show up on all the things you're stitching, then you can do it twice and stitch through with 2 different colors, which is what I did over here. I just wanted to point this out. You can see I went from a dark fabric here, I stitched through a darker fabric, which shows the pink better, but then when the pink goes on top of the pink heart, you couldn't see it at all, and I did not like how that looked, so I added another layer of the dark blue on here so that I've got 2 different colors going on. And you could do that all at once. You could use a strand of each held together. I did that as an afterthought after I started seeing it happen. I had more control over how the blue was always going to be on the outside and the pink was always going to be on the inside. But it doesn't really matter. You can, just kind of play around with that. It's just something to think about. All right, let me get this threaded up here. Also, as I mentioned before a couple of times now, with the running stitch, you can choose to, have horizontal lines, vertical lines, those checks that cross over each other. You can do totally organic shapes. I'm trying to keep things a little bit simple here with these circles. So what I did was I just traced around lids or other circular objects you might have in your house. Let's see, I hope this shows up on this fabric. I'll be able to see it, but I just don't know if you guys will be able to see it. But I really like how it looks when the circle extends off of the piece a little bit. Kind of arrange things in a way that looks nice. So I'm just using that to get these nice little circular shapes marked in on my project. So there's a circle. I know you can't see it very well over here, but you can imagine, right? We all have imaginations. And then maybe I'll do another circle here, and this one's going to kind of underlap that circle. So I'm just going to draw it like this. And I think another one over here would be kind of nice. Maybe right here. Sorry, I know you're not going to be able to see it on that darker blue very well. But maybe your brain will connect those shapes. But I like to just kind of play around with where the circles go. You don't need to have 3. You can have however many you want to. And then you can go ahead and start stitching in those circles. So just stitch right on the line to begin with. I always start with the one that looks like it's sitting on top of the others, but you don't have to do that. Also, it's nice to start with the one that has the most, that's holding down the most stuff. So this one's overlapping all 3 patches here. So this will be a great place to start, I think. So I'm going to come up from, actually I'm going to come up in between my patch and my garment with my knot. And I'm just doing that same running stitch we did earlier, okay? So in and out, in and out. like this. Oops. Having a little bit of problems with my pins here. That would be another reason that it might be good to do a little bit of a glue stick situation. Glue your pieces down and then maybe you don't have to use the pins. There we go. So in and out, and so you can see here I am, I'm just stitching on just that one layer of the jacket, but that's fine. I like how it looks when the stitching extends past the patches and just kind of blends in, kind of drifts off into the garment itself. I think it looks nice. It also adds a little bit of strength to your piece right there. That's, you know, close to the patches. It keeps your fabric from stretching out, which could cause more ripping. It just stabilizes it just a little bit more, which is one of the things I really like about using a running stitch. I'm always checking back here to make sure that I am not stitching my project to something else or another part of my project. One time when I was we used to call it home economics when I was growing up, when you would learn sewing in school. I sat next to a kid who sewed his project to his pants, and I thought that was so hilarious. I didn't say anything because I was really shy and I was nice, but later on, as an adult, I worked in a costume shop and I knew so much better than that. I actually did the same thing. I stitched my project to my pants once because I was holding it in my lap. So, you know, we all make mistakes. Doesn't matter how much experience you have. All right, so I just want to get around this circle so that I can show you how to figure out where to put the stitches on the next round. And I'm almost there. I got a little accidental knot here. There we go. There we are. So in and out, in and out. And I'm, you know, going through all of those layers. If you find this easier to sew in and sew back out, you can. It does take more time to do that instead of just kind of pushing through. It might also help you if you are a newer sewer to have your hand behind your work. Here, I'll show you that just as soon as I get this tangle sorted out here. All right, there we go. But you may find it easier if you're a newer sewer to have your hand behind your work like this so that you can kind of help guide your needle in a way, like pushing on the fabric next to where your needle is. You don't want your needle to go into your finger though, of course. Okay, so here I am finishing up my little round of stitching, and I'm gonna go back in here and then I'm gonna come out just below right there. I'm going to pull that out because I don't need it anymore. And now I'm going to go, I'm doing the opposite path again. So what that means, just for a little review, is I'm on the next round inside, you can see, especially right here where the fabric is lighter, where there's a gap between stitches, there's a stitch just below that. So this is really only going to work for maybe a round or two. And then your stitches are going to start getting really short because you're working around in a circle. So, you know, if you drew a circle in here, your stitches would be super tiny if you had the same amount of stitches as you do on the outside ring. So that's the part where you just kind of make things up. So every once in a while, you're just going to skip a stitch. Here, actually, let me show you what that looks like here. Let's see. So just every once in a while, like right here, as I was working around, I did not put a stitch right here. That's where so there's a little gap right there, And I would have put a stitch right there, but I didn't because there's another space right here. So every once in a while, you just have to skip a stitch or kind of fudge things a little. You won't even notice it later. It's totally fine. I'm just pointing this out because you know, now you know to stagger your stitches, but when you start doing those circles, it gets a little confusing. So after you get all of your circles stitched in, so you'll do a circle here, a circle here, a circle here. Then after that, you're gonna go in with those vertical stitches, or you could do horizontal stitches or something else. And you're just gonna kind of stitch up to where those stitches are and then turn around and go back down. So you'll just be doing little sections of stitching. I know it looks like it maybe connects up here, but the threads do not go all the way through. So this would be a little section you do this little section down here, then over here you can go the full length of that piece right there. So that's how you work all that stuff out. And so, you know, it's a fun way to look at thread and running stitches and kind of collaging things together. I really like using different colors for the different shapes, but you could certainly use all white or, you know, all black, and you'd still be able to see that movement, especially if it contrasts enough with what's going on behind it. It just gives it a really fun look of stitching. All right, I'm just gonna go through here and see how many things I missed. I know I was not paying as much attention as I like to all of your comments because I was just trying to get through things because I'm a little bit behind. Let's see. A good way to mending holes in jeans. I think that was a question about this. This is a great way to mend holes in your jeans. Yeah, patching it and doing all those little running stitches makes it a lot stronger. Do I use thread conditioner to prevent tangling on my threads? I do not. I used to use some kind of like hand stitching wax. When I worked in the costume shop and did a lot of hand stitching, that's what I would use. Oh, somebody else is mentioning that too. Beeswax can help with thread tangles. That's what I learned. Oh, that's Colleen. Hi, Colleen. So yeah, I used to use beeswax when I worked in the costume shop. But yeah, it's definitely something to try out. It does seem to work on those heavier weight threads to keep it from tangling a little bit. Let's see. Oh, we have a question. Do I have any patchwork with macrame? Oh, that's interesting. I have never done that, but now I'm interested in learning all about that. Thank you for throwing that question in there. I'm going to be thinking about that. And let's see. Okay. It looks like what type of thread? Oh, okay, and we did have a response about that. We've got the specifics of the thread that I'm using there. And yes, and that stabilizer is really great. Okay, Nakomi is saying, I love how with just a few stitches you can change the look and really embellish even your own stitches. Yes, once you cross them over each other or when you arrange them differently or change color, it looks totally different. It's really fun. All right. It looks like, wow, you guys, I'm so sorry I've neglected all this chat going on here. Oh, white tailor's chalk is a good example of working, you know, something to draw on those darker fabrics. That is a great point there. Let's see. Is the over-the-top patch technique the best and easiest to use on an item that you cannot stitch through to the back? Oh, like if you're putting a patch on a couch or something like that, like on something where you can't get to the back of the fabric or the inside of the fabric. Yeah, I would definitely use the over-the-top patch technique for that. It'll be easier. With certain things, you might be able to open up a hole big enough to slide fabric between whatever, you know, the thing you're patching and whatever's behind it. You might be able, just depending on what it is that you're working on, you might be able to do that and get it in between there. If you prefer the look of how, you know, things peeking through the little window kind of thing, you could think about that. But you can definitely use this, just, you know, adding patches directly on top, stitching right into it. That is a great way to patch things where you can't get through to the back. That is a really good point. Okay, and Linda's asking if we're using 2 strands of embroidery thread. We are using kind of the equivalent of 4 strands in a way, because I'm using the Sulky Petites. These are hand stitching thread, and the way that it comes off of here, 1 strand of this is equal to 2 strands of embroidery floss, so 2 of the little threads in the embroidery floss. And I'm using it doubled in my needle throughout this whole process. So for the embroidery and also for all the running stitches as well. So both of those things. And Sandy's wondering if you could do this on a t-shirt. I think you can. If it is a t-shirt with a lot of drape and a lot of stretch, it might be a little tricky to do that. But you could, I mean, if you're using it on just a regular t-shirt that doesn't stretch a whole lot, you know, just like an average t-shirt, I think it would be just fine. And I would patch it with another fabric that's similar to it. You could try it with a woven fabric and just see what the results would be, but it might end up being a little bit stiffer there. I'm not really sure. But it's something to play around with. You can always, you know, the cool thing is with these big running stitches, they're fairly long and you can very easily take them out. You can just slide, you know, your seam ripper under there and pick it and then slide it out. So if you're working on it and you're like, I don't like how this is turning out, you can remove it and put a different patch on. So yeah, I say, you know, this is a great project for experimenting with, because you can use so many different colors, different types of fabric, cut out your patches in different shapes, add embroidery here and there. I mean, there's just a lot of room for artistic freedom in this project, and that's just one of the things I love about it so much. You can very much tailor it to your own personality or whoever you're mending this for. I mean, that would make a really awesome present for somebody if they had something that they really, really loved and they, you know, you were able to mend it for them. You could just add some cute little details on there, something that really speaks to them. Do a little embroidery of, you know, like their favorite video game character in the corner or something, you know, like just really make it a personal mending experience. Okay. Okay, and Deb is saying it would be interesting to see if all the holes that people buy in their jeans will now be patched with this technique. Yeah. Yep. Could you do this on a a t-shirt? Okay, we've already got that. And I hope you do a class for patching things knitted with yarn. Okay, I was going to ask you guys about that because there are so many more mending techniques. I love mending. I love visible mending. I do it with crochet and with knitting, and there's even in those separate groups, like within crochet and within knitting, there are so many different techniques of mending those projects. So definitely, if you guys are out there and you want to know more about that, let us know in the comments so that, you know, we can arrange some kind of a live event or something for those types of projects. I would love to do more of this. Thank you for bringing that up, Tracy. Okay, and with that, I just want to thank you guys so much for being here. I really appreciate it. It's always so great to have so many people active in the chat. It makes me just feel really happy that you guys are interested in this too. And I hope you go out and mend some things and make them really awesome. Okay, thanks. Bye, everybody.